Meeting of the Hartsville-Trousdale County Planning Commission to order. We will begin with our roll call. Mary Ann.
Mary Ann Baker's here. Sarah Murray. Here. John Kerr.
Here.
Rhonda Kiesling. Here. David Nallner. Here. David Thomas. David Thomas. Carol Pruitt. Here. Mark Swaffer. Mark Swaffer. Thomas Harper. Here. Sam Edwards. Here. 7 present, 2 absent.
We do have a quorum. You read your emails, you know that Mark is out and David are both out of town on business. Are there any changes to the agenda that we need to consider? Sam? Not that I know. Any member got any changes that needs to be made? If not, we will use our current agenda. There is no old business, so we will get right into new business. First is final subdivision plat approval for Marshall property for 2 lots located in the 7th district. Mr. Carmen's here for that.
I don't think they have a copy of the plat. I think they just have their zoning map.
I think I'm going to have to talk to your daddy. He's working you too hard, losing all your hair.
Anyway, this is the part of the Marshall property over on Sam Beasley Road out there past the schools. And Marshalls are looking at cutting off 2 lots out there. It's got sewer, water, fire protection. Be glad to address any questions you might have.
How far is this down below Joe's house, roughly? Just right down the road? 1,000. Okay.
Between that, what the property is, it's got 100 acres for sale.
This is probably part of that.
You know where Joe lives?
Yeah.
Well, it would be right down Sam Beasley.
This is part of the 100 acres that are for sale.
But he says it's before you get to the bridge.
Before you get to
No, you're on the wrong road.
no.
You said Thompson Lane.
Yes, lot 6.
Lot.
Lot 6. It's down in that area. Right there, about where lot 6.
It's right past that.
Yeah. Your
Okay.
packet's missing a page number, but if you flip to the back side of the first page, there's a zoning map there. You can see where it sits in relation to Lock 6 Road relatively.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's good. All right. So Jim has brought us plat, and he is asking for final plat approval. Mary, would you like to comment on these?
Sure. There was, I think I sent you all a staff report on Friday. And there was a couple issues that needed to be resolved on this plat. I received a resubmittal for it, and those issues have all been resolved. And there are no remaining issues to be tackled or variances to be considered. So staff's recommending approval of this final plat based on compliance with the Hartsville-Trousdale subdivision regulations.
Mary, could you?
Should I restate what I had said?
Did you hear? Did you hear her? She said there were some incidents or some things that were brought up on Friday, but they've all been resolved. That's the short version. Is that right?
That's right. And the recommendation is approval based on compliance with the subdivision regulations.
Same.
The sizing is consistent with the zoning. All the measurements work out. The building zone's good. So I recommend approval.
Okay. Members, questions for either Jim, Sam, or Mary? If not, do I hear a motion? Motion by Thomas to approve final plat for the Marshall property, these two lots. Do I hear a second? Second by, was that Mary Ann? Who? Oh, Carol. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, say no. It does pass unanimously. Next on our agenda is site plan approval for Jesse Peters. This is Front Street Apartments. Applicant requests site plan approval for an 8-unit.
I think we skipped an item.
Oh, did I skip something?
Yeah,
Where it must have
my
been.
packet's numbered wrong. I have 1 twice, but it should be on page 3 in your staff report.
Okay, so this is, all right, sorry about that. This is preliminary subdivision plat approval for Arthur B. Harper. Mr. Harper, Jim's here for Mr. Harper. This is Arthur and Mr. Moore. Oh yeah, there's my man. Good, you?
That's the poster box.
Okay. Make. Everybody familiar with the location of this property, just right out the road, right out past.
It's right next to Hickory Ridge.
Yeah. Jim?
Yeah, Mr. Of course, this came in before y'all for rezone back a few months back, and Mr. Harper's looking at constructing a road into this and making a subdivision. So try to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Mary?
So there's a couple items to be discussed or reviewed for this project. We'll start with the note that the R3 zoning district single-family dwelling units are required to have at least 6,000 square foot for the lot. All of those proposed lots exceed 10,000 square foot, so the zoning requirement is met. For the setbacks, those front 2 lots are zone C2. And he's snapping his fingers because he forgot. So just if the front 2 lots just need to have the setbacks labeled because those setbacks are different than the lot typical on the plan. I think they're shown correctly. They just need to be clarified that they're different than that lot typical. For the next 2 items are in relation to the subdivision regulations. It's actually just 1 item. I just have it broken out as 2 in the staff report bullets, but the Planning Commission adopted the language for requiring sidewalks along new streets last year. So sidewalks, the language in 4-108.1 states that sidewalks shall be required along all streets constructed in all subdivisions, excluding alleys and those streets for industrial use. In the subsection on the location of sidewalks and bicycle paths, subdivision regulations state that sidewalks are required along both sides of all residential subdivision streets. Currently, the preliminary plat as shown proposes the sidewalk stopping at lots 2 and lot A and not continuing all the way to McMurray Boulevard. The sidewalk should continue to the end of the proposed new street based on that language in the subdivision regulations. I think the developer had stated that the intent was to have those sidewalks completed at the time that those commercial lots were to develop. Staff's only hesitancy with that would be that we don't have anything in our zoning ordinance requiring the construction of sidewalks related to a site plan. So that's why it would be included as a consideration for this preliminary plat and the final plat for this property. Staff did note in the report that if the planning commission does consider issuing a variance to allow the sidewalks configuration, staff would suggest requiring a pedestrian crosswalk at the point where the sidewalk currently is ending. All the plat issues were handled other than noting the setbacks on the C2 lot and just noting if there's any proposed landscaping or lighting on the site plan for the mailbox configuration. Based on this set of items, staff is recommending approval of the preliminary plat with the conditions that the sidewalk be extended to McMurray Boulevard, the distance to the setback lines for the C2 property are labeled or lot typical for the commercial property is added.
Any questions for Mary? Sure.
Okay, so what she's saying is we left the sidewalks off of lots 1 and 21, if you'll notice that. We would, I mean, I don't know if it needs a variance. We would like to request that we not have to construct those at this time. It's our feeling that whenever those 2 commercial lots get built in, that there's a good chance that the road grades will change. And that whatever sidewalks would be built in there right now will be destroyed and be replaced. That it would be better to put it in on the site plan as part of any commercial construction right there. But anyway, that's why those are left off. And so we would like to request a variance if that's what's needed to for that to happen. And the other issue she was talking about, the setbacks, that's just a minor issue that I forgot to put on because they changed from the typical right there because those are commercial lots rather than residential.
Okay. So I can see lots 1 and 21 for everybody's information are commercial lots. And so what Jim's saying is that if they're developed commercially, whoever comes in and puts in a parking lot, what it would probably possibly tear up the existing sidewalks or something. Mary, would you like to respond?
I just want to note that while that may be true, that the sidewalks would be destroyed, the proposed resolution that we put in to the zoning ordinance has not made it through the county commission. So we have no requirement that if they do a site plan for a commercial use, that they would be required to include sidewalks as a part of that. So that's just a note for this commission to consider.
I could see Mary, I very much agree with Mary on the crosswalk. If you look at your plat, the cluster mailbox is right there in the corner of lot 21. And I could see the sidewalks going up and around and come back, and then a crosswalk there would be a good safety addition for someone walking from lots 2 through 9 down that way to come across to the cluster mailbox. Questions, comments before we go to Sam? Anybody got any questions for Mary or Jim at this point? Sam?
With these 2 particular lots, I don't know if anybody's very familiar with it, but they will take, the 2 front lots will take significant construction on the front. So with these 2 particular lots, I would agree that if any construction does need to take place, the sidewalks in that area will be destroyed. So they would have to be redone anyways. So granting a variance for and adding in a crosswalk would probably be reasonable in this situation, because I do believe, I do agree with them that with construction on those 2 front lots, that it would definitely be destroyed. And when commercial business comes in, that's a request that we can put in for them, is to make sure that they connect the 2, which honestly, it'd probably be beneficial to them connecting a subdivision, but that's something for you to consider.
Why would we have to grant a variance if it's not in our commercial regs? If we don't make them do it for commercial building
Well, it could be, they could already be accepted by the county court at that time, by that time.
by that time? Okay.
And as I think everybody knows, it is a pretty good bluff right there. So like Sam was saying, it would take considerable dirt movement and stuff to develop the 2 commercial lots. You know, I don't think a sidewalk would survive that. Other questions? So if I am understanding this correctly, Mr. Harper and I can't call him anything but Craig. That's what I know. So Craig and Arthur are requesting for preliminary subdivision plat approval for this subdivision there with a variance on the sidewalks. And I think it would be just good safety to include a crosswalk for safety reasons there if the commission wants to suggest a variance or make a motion for a variance. Discussion? Okay. Questions for Sam or Mary? All right. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve of the variance.
Okay, Sarah makes a motion to approve it with the variance for the sidewalks and the crosswalk. Do I hear a second? Second by Thomas. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. It does pass unanimously. So we're now ready for the Peters. Okay. Okay.
I think it's just a zoning issue.
Okay. Next on our agenda is a site plan approval for Jesse Peters Front Street Apartments. Is there anyone here representing Mr. Peters? Yes, sir. Come up to the podium, please, and tell us your name.
Evan White, I'll be representing Jesse tonight on the site. He's
ahead,
wanting
sir.
to put in 8 apartment buildings on the property. And I'll answer any questions if you got any.
Y'all know where we're talking about up above the
It's right
post
next
office?
right next to the post office. It's where there's some old buildings down there that's still there to be demoed, so.
He's talking about the very next lot up above, where, is Katie still there? Right up above Katie's beauty shop and the post office.
And it'll be from Front Street. The grade's too great to come off West Main.
Mary?
So there's a few different considerations for this site plan. The first thing I want to note is not a consideration for this site plan, but it is something that I do want the commission to have a discussion about coming up. And I might get with Sam on this. So in the C1 zoning district, any residential use excluding mobile homes is permitted by right. The bulk standards do not describe a density for the C1 zoning district. I think it's intended to be in line with the R3, but that is not listed. So I think that's a resolution that we might all look at as a commission to determine at what density you want to permit the residential uses that are allowed in the C1 zoning district in the future. The moment he is proposing 8 units, which is slightly higher than what would be allowed under an R3 zoning, but there's no maximum density listed. And the configuration that he's proposing now does meet all the setbacks and provides enough space for him to get to the correct number of parking spaces for those units. So at least for that standard, he's able to meet the other bulk requirements in the ordinance as they stand. The first item that I want to address that is lacking in the site plan is section 3.110 of the zoning code requires the buffer strips where a use requiring a site plan abuts at any point upon property that is zoned residential or agricultural. The developer of said use shall provide a landscape strip at the point of abutment, which should consist of a fence no less than 7 feet tall and landscaping, including trees, the intent of which is to create an opaque screen. The proposed site is surrounded by residential zoning on 3 sides. There's a zoning map in your packet on page 7. I would just note quick, I haven't not updated this portion yet. The property directly to the west was rezoned to C1 last year. So the east, south, and north sides are all zoned R1, and per the ordinance would require a buffer between this use and those other uses. He's not showing the buffer on the site plan currently. If he did want to request a variance from that buffer requirement, that's a variance that's in the zoning ordinance. So I would send that request through the Board of Zoning Appeals to get relief on that. So it wouldn't be this body that would grant him that variance from that buffer strip requirement. For the development standards for group housing projects, which is 4.070 in the zoning ordinance, there's a set of items to review a group housing projects for compliance in the zoning ordinance in that section. There's just a couple things to note on this. First, the property to the west is zoned C1. The side setback on that side can be adjusted to reflect this. It's showing a 15-foot setback. You can show a 0-foot setback on that side technically with the zoning. That's just a note. The other thing to note, I believe the units on either side of the breezeway are going to be joined by a common wall, but there's no elevation indicating that. If they're not joined by a common wall, and these are 2 separate units, they would need to be 30 foot apart for what's in the ordinance. So we just need some clarity from the applicant on that. And then the site plan notes that Hartsville will do solid waste pickup for this development. I guess I just want clarification on what the solid waste department, the trash pickup department has said that they'll do for that. So I'm assuming they'll need a dumpster or how that will work because they won't go to the units.
The owner is proposing to do trash cans in the breezeway for each unit and for them to pick those up.
Okay, and is Hartsville waste, I don't know, maybe Sam can answer this question. If the solid waste department's comfortable going through the breezeway to receive those, or if they'll have to be brought to the road. I'm not sure what the process will be.
I'm not aware. I would have to ask him directly.
Okay.
You proposing that each unit have their own individual trash can that they would then roll out to the curb on trash day?
Correct.
Yeah, you'd have. No, I mean, obviously the truck can't go up there and get it.
No, it'd be roadside pickup.
Yeah, so I would just be concerned that configuration needs to be cleared with the Hartsville Solid Waste Department. And if you do need to put in a trash receptacle, it's a dumpster with screening, it should be shown on this site plan. For the remaining site plan issues, the slopes at the southwest corner of the property exceed 20%. The applicants including a proposed grading plan on sheet 3 pertaining to those areas with steep slopes that you can look at. The sheet C3, I think in your site plan shows the new proposed grading for those areas where that slope exceeds 20%. C3, it's numbered as. And then there's no centralized mailbox facility shown. We have not added that updated requirement to the zoning resolution yet. Is it added?
Yes, we added it. It's a kiosk. I don't know if you can tell the little symbol, but it's just in front of apartment 4 there between the sidewalk. It's in the
I just missed that. on the
green area there.
Okay, that's shown then. And has that gone through approval with the postal service with that configuration?
Say again,
Sorry, did the postal service approve that location and configuration? Just making
not to
sure.
my knowledge.
Okay,
It's just per their standards that they tell you got to do. It's got ADA accessibility and sidewalks to it.
okay. And there's no signage indicated anywhere on the site plan, but it should be meeting setbacks and requirements in code if they do want to put a sign anywhere for this development. So
I'll address the comments on the buffer zones. The post office is technically zoned residential right now, even though it's a post office, so okay. What,
There's a business between the post office and,
correct, and it's zoned residential right now, even though it's a commercial business. So we felt like there was no sense in putting a fence and all that, since it's already a commercial type usage, even though it's R1. That they want a variance for that reason. The other note is that we can put a fence, but it'll be alongside the road, because you've got roadside frontage on the north and the south, and that's where the actual residential lots are on the other side of the road. So we could technically put them there, but you're just gonna be putting a fence right down the road, and I don't know if you really want that look or not, so.
well, it's kind of like Mary said, this body wouldn't speak to that anyway. That would be up to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and is that not what you said?
yeah, so I think what this body would do would be to issue a recommendation on the site plan for approval or disapproval. And then if you do want relief from that buffer requirement, you would apply to the Board of Zoning Appeals for them to review that variance. Because that's a zoning ordinance variance.
Okay.
It's a common building with a breezeway that's got 8 apartments in it, 4 on the bottom and 4 on the top.
The 4 on either side, they're going to be connected by common walls, correct? Okay.
The biggest issue I see with your trash would be the upper apartments. They're just gonna drag them down those steps and back up them steps.
That'd be correct. I mean, even if you had a dumpster, they're going to drag them up and down the steps. So technically, I guess they could you could get a deck that would come down, but either way, you're gonna have stairs with the way the site lays with the topography.
Okay, I'm just asking a question. Sam needs to talk to Cliff about that as we move on. Mr. Noller, do you have a question?
Yeah, this little pad right here. What's on that?
That's just it's actually a green area for some detention, but it's a curb for parking. So it's kind of, it's a lower down area.
Can you point to where the mailbox is on the site plan? I don't have a copy of it in front of me.
I've got some larger ones up there, but this is gonna be hard to see. There's a little symbol here that's right outside of apartment 4. Right beside the sidewalk in the grass area. If you're on sheet C3,
I didn't hear.
there's gonna be a spot shot that says 87.94. It's right with it.
If it's attached to the building, then that means the postman would have to get out. That's what I'm saying.
Who's asking? I'll come point to them.
Yeah, I think we all are.
So he's got a lot of issues he's got to correct there.
Is it labeled as J?
For what the postman says, they're not allowed to go on private. They've got to access it. You live in Village? Maybe.
That's who is her? Postmaster. Okay. I don't know who's up there now.
The lower down area, we've got 2 detention areas. We got one in the parking lot, and then there's one to the east side that catches water. So in order to develop, you can't let no more water run off your site than what was there before. So we're catching water and releasing it at a slower rate. So it took 2 areas.
That's the
Yes.
baseball field looking thing. The baseball field, diamond shape that you see on there. That's what that is. It'll catch water, and you see the dotted line. It goes out towards the street.
But we haven't talked to solid waste. We don't know anything from solid waste, right? We've not checked with them about the trash.
No,
pickup.
and he's looking for, they're asking for preliminary. I mean, they're just asking for site plan approval. I mean,
Yeah, this is a site plan approval, so you won't see this again. If you were concerned about solid waste and not talking to the department for the commission, I would recommend that any approval be contingent on if the solid waste department does require a dumpster for this development, that dumpster meet all the requirements in the zoning code as far as screening and setbacks and loading and unloading for the solid waste department. Does that make sense?
or should we make this preliminary and bring it back?
You can't make it preliminary. You
Okay.
could defer it.
Okay. What do you- should defer it, or-
It's
There you
an
go.
it's an option. You can say that, like you said, you can say that as long as it's approval from solid waste. Or does whatever the recommendation is. We also need to check on the postmaster.
Right.
Yeah, so-
Solid waste and postmaster.
That or defer it to next month.
Okay, and I'm fixing to call on you.
Yeah.
Does any commission members have a question for Mary?
Standing on Main Street here. Post office over here.
You know, David, going up Front Street, it's much more level back there. Questions for Mary before we go to Sam? Sam?
So listening to Mary, we've got two options. We can do an approval contingent upon an agreement being made with solid waste. My recommendation would be to figure out do a dumpster instead of individual trash cans. They can carry trash bags down to the dumpster. I think it's just gonna be too many trash cans on the street for pickup in that area. But that's my opinion. I'll need to talk with solid waste about it. Then we also need to check with postmaster because I believe in my emails, I thought the centralized postal box was gonna go next to the driveway on Front Street. But if it's gonna be mounted to the units, I need to check with postmaster and make sure she's okay with that. So, but if they both come back with approval, saying that they're okay with both of these, then it's good to go. Or we can defer it and come back next month with those answers and then approve or deny them. The comment on the buffer zone, which will be going to the Board of Zoning Appeals, that is a business on that lot, which technically should not be there, but it is there. So it's a zoning issue.
Well, you're talking about a business that's been grandfathered in for years.
That's true.
I mean, it's been,
It really should be a commercial lot.
I understand, but both it and the post office have been there longer than a lot of us.
Well, we've got to ignore the post office zoning because they can go anywhere. They're like churches, so they can
So-
go anywhere.
To clarify, yes, that would be something he needs to apply to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a variance. But if the commission considers an approval, a contingency that they should add this evening is the contingency that the buffer requirements are met. And then he would ask for relief from that through the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Anything else?
No, the project looks good. We just need to hash out the dumpster issue, the trash, and the postal box area location. And then the Board of Zoning Appeals can decide the buffer zone for the trees and fencing.
Okay. Questions for Sam? So from what I'm hearing from Mary and from Sam is the project looks good. The question about the buffer zone would be made not by this body, but by the Board of Zoning Appeals. The actual question, two questions that affect us tonight are dealing with the potential trash pickup and the potential, well, not potential, you have to have cluster mailbox location and yeah. So the two options as I see them tonight is a motion could be made to defer this and come back in March and with all that already worked out, or the motion could be made to approve with the conditions that Sam will check with the both the post office and the solid waste department and work out with the petitioner how best to proceed on those. Questions? Okay, do I hear a motion?
Motion to defer to next month.
Okay, I have a motion to defer it for a month. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I do have a second. Those in favor, please say aye, or well, discussion. Those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Chairman votes no. Okay, we have two no's. Let's make sure we got this right. All those in favor of deferring it a month, raise your hand. 5 yes. All those opposed, raise your hand. 5 yes, 2 no. It will be deferred for a month.
The BZA, will that be before the next meeting?
I will do the best I can, but I don't control those meetings. So I will tomorrow request for that meeting to take place, and then hopefully we can get you an answer, but I don't control when they meet.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right, moving on. Request by Mr. Robert Powers for rezoning approval for 3 lots on East Main Street. Lots will be combined for an apartment building that's planned. Anyone here, Mr. Powers, or anyone here representing Mr. Powers? Mr. Powers, would you come to the podium, please? Just tell us what you'd like to do.
Plan to combine the 3 lots into 1 lot and build apartments on that combined lot.
Okay. Roughly how many apartments are you thinking about?
I talked it over with Sam, and I think I can have up to maybe 22 based on the land area, but I'm just looking for probably 5 buildings of 4 units each, which would be 20.
Okay. Okay. Mary?
So as the applicant has noted, he's requesting rezoning for 3 lots, 613, 615, and 617 East Main Street. They're identified as tax map 27D, Group A, parcels 3, 4, and 5. Each of these parcels consists of about 0.6 acres. This is my estimation based on the tax assessor's site. And if I note any density requirements or estimations, that's based on the tax assessor's site. I haven't seen a plat for this property, so I don't know the exact size. This property is on the north side of East Main Street, just east of the intersection with Wright Lane. The surrounding properties are zoned R1, low density residential, and C2, highway commercial. There are several properties that are zoned R3, high density residential, a few properties away to the west on the south side of East Main Street. If you look in your packet on page 10, the number is missing from page 10, but you can see the surrounding zoning of the properties in that packet. The area proposed for rezoning is the circled in green on there. The properties in the Hartsville-Trousdale Water and Sewer Utility District, there is a 6-inch water line on, and that's a typo. I never corrected that. It says Dalton Hollow Road, but it's East Main Street. And there's a gravity sewer line on East Main Street in this area. The property is not in a special flood hazard area and is not identified as having any significant steep slopes. The Trousdale County Growth Plan identifies the subject property as within the Hartsville Urban Services District in a planned growth area. East Main Street is not identified as an arterial or collector in the major thoroughfare plan. The current zone of this property is R1. R1 is described as providing suitable areas for low density residential development characterized by an open appearance. Most generally, this district is single family homes and detached dwellings. And the intent of that district is to be located so that the provisions of appropriate urban services and facilities are physically and economically facilitated. R3, which is the high density residential district and the district that the applicant is requesting to rezone to, is described as being available to provide areas for high density residential development where sufficient urban facilities, including public sewer, are available or where such facilities can be extended prior to development. Generally, this district is characterized by residential structures, each containing multiple numbers of dwelling units, as well as single and 2-family detached dwellings and mobile home parks. However, it is the intent of this ordinance to not restrict in number the dwelling units contained in a building, provided there is sufficient area of zone lot and open space on such lot relative to the number of dwelling units. It continues to go on a little bit about community facilities in that description that you can read. The R3 zoning district permits by right detached single-family and duplex dwellings, multifamily dwellings, group homes, and their accessory uses and structures and essential services. The use is permitted by a special exception, which would be a process that the applicant would go through with the Board of Zoning Appeals to get granted any of those uses, would be mobile home parks, administrative uses, community assembly uses, community education uses, cultural and recreational facilities, intermediate impact facilities, personal and group care facilities, and religious facilities. Section 5.043F lists the minimum required lot size and setbacks for the R3 zoning district. And those are noted in your packet in page 9 that you can see. Each of these 3 properties are around 0.6 acres. The applicant noted that he'd likely combine the lots for development. So altogether, it totals about 1.8 acres or around 78,400 square feet. Like I said, I just did this calculation based on the tax assessor site. I haven't seen the exact size of the property, but assuming that size, the density for these 3 properties together could be around 13 single-family lots, 8 duplex family lots, or 21 multifamily dwelling units. In staff's rendering of this rezoning request, the property is not constrained by floodplain or steep slopes. The property appears to be adequately served by both water and sewer. There are no adjacent properties zoned R3. However, there are properties on the south side of East Main that are zoned R3 a few parcels away. The property is within the Urban Services District, which is identified as a planned growth area in the county plan. The R3 zoning district is noted as appropriate where sufficient urban facilities, including water and sewer, are available or can be available prior to development. If it can be confirmed that East Main Street is sufficient to support additional traffic volume and the public water and sewer are sufficient or can be sufficient prior to development, this rezoning request would be consistent with the guidance provided in the R3 zoning district and the Hartsville zoning ordinance.
Questions? I'm sorry. Questions for Mary? Of course, applicant is asking for a rezone. All this body does is make recommendations to the county court. Only the county court can rezone property. And we all know that. I'm just reminding you. Any questions for Mary? Okay, Sam?
Reviewing this myself, this particular area, his request for the rezoning, there is R3 that is relatively close and the sewer's available, the water's available. I believe East Main can handle, in my opinion, the extra traffic. And I also think that if he does what he plans, it would improve what is already existing there. So that is my opinion on it. If anybody's got any questions.
Questions for Sam? Okay. Discussion or questions from any commission member? Motions?
I move to approve this request.
Okay. Ms. Keesling makes a motion to send this to the county commission with the approval of the planning commission. Do I have a second? Have a second. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. Okay. It does pass with 1 no vote. Okay, Mr. Powers, you can get with Sam. I'm not sure when the county court that February being a short month. I don't know if we, well, you got so many days you have to advertise. So I'm not sure how February works out.
It'll be on the 28th.
It'd be on the 28th.
Mm.
Is that enough time to?
Mm. 28th this month, it'll be seen the first time. And then 28th of next month, it'll be seen the second time.
So it has to go through 2 readings. So I wasn't sure you could get on the February agenda, but Sam feels that first reading could be held the 28th of this month. So 2 weeks from tonight. Yes, sir. Thank you. Next is a request by staff to amend the Trouser County zoning resolution, section 5.041D, to add mining activities and related services as a special exception. Sam, would you like to address this?
So with discussion with Mary and GNRC, there is nothing specifically stated for zoning for mining. It's just a blanket statement. In my personal opinion, I believe it was left as a blanket statement so that any area that it fits in with all the requirements of being sparsely populated and generally in a good location, no matter what the zoning is, it could go there. They wouldn't have to request a rezoning. But it is advisable, or I have been instructed that it's advisable that we need to set a zoning designation for the mining activities. We might come forward with other ones because I know there's a few others that are just blanket statements in the zoning regulations. We are requesting for that to be under A1 zoning.
Well, partially.
Partially.
So based on Sam's staff request and the request, I guess it's not of an applicant, it's just a staff request. But I had been reviewing the Hartsville zoning resolution to clarify this pertains, I'm sorry, Trousdale zoning resolution to clarify this pertains to the zoning resolution, which is for outside the urban services district. So this would be in the county. There's currently a set of development standards listed for mining and quarrying. It's in the section of the zoning resolution that includes standards for a number of other uses, usually pertaining to special exception processes. However, mining and quarrying is not listed as a use that is permitted through special exception or otherwise in any of the zoning districts as outlined currently in the resolution. So that's the background on this request. I gathered a few examples from some other communities pertaining to mining and quarrying uses. To start, I'm going to walk through those examples with you all. And then I drafted 2 different resolutions that take 2 different approaches to adding this use. I'm going to preface this conversation with, as I walk through these requirements in other communities, most of them are much more stringent than what's currently in the Trousdale zoning resolution. So I would note that any decision this body makes on the proposed resolutions, I would say it would be worth a revisit in the future to look at adopting updated standards for quarrying and mining at some point as a body. These just propose adding the use. This does not propose changing the standards at this time. So the first example, and this is page 12 in your staff packet, is Dixon County. And these are not necessarily pure communities. I know I noted pure, but these were the ones that I could find examples for. In Dixon County, the ordinance currently defines mining activities as facilities to crush, classify, separate, or otherwise treat rock, ore, or minerals extracted from the ground. They do not permit mining or quarrying activities by right in any zoning district. They permit mining or quarrying through special exception in their A1 zoning district. However, they clarify that in the A1 district, it should be the surface and subsurface mining or quarrying of natural minerals or resources and or the storage of natural mineral resources. In their heavier industrial district, they allow mining activities and related services through a special exception permit. So the difference is they allow the subsurface and surface mining or quarrying, so the actual extraction in the A1 district, and then anything that includes what they've defined as mining activities. So that's facilities to crush, classify, separate, or otherwise treat rock or ore as something that's reviewed for their heavy industrial district. In Robertson County, they define a quarry as an operation for the dredging, digging, extraction, mining, or quarrying of stone, sand, gravel, or minerals for commercial purposes. They permit it by right in their heavy industrial district, and they allow it to be reviewed as a special exception in their agricultural business district and their general industrial district. In Rutherford County, a much bigger county, they define mining, drilling, and quarrying as the operations and facilities either utilized by or in support of the extraction of minerals, ores, petroleum, and natural gas, or in the quarrying collection of stone, gravel, sand, clay, and other non-metallic materials. And they list examples including clay, ceramic, and refractory minerals, sand and gravel quarrying, or stone quarrying. They do not permit mining, drilling, and quarrying by right in any district. They do allow it as a special exception process in their agricultural district and their heavy industrial district. And I noted here that Rutherford County has a much more developed set of standards that regard buffering, distancing, site reclamation, and performance standards for those uses. And I have a link in here, and I realize that you can't view the online PDF, but if you do all want, if you're curious, their commission had a report produced on a number of peer communities and what their buffering standards were and things like that. So that might be a future reference item for this commission to review and look at if you'd like to. So based on some of those peer communities and the conversations that Sam and I have had, I drafted 2 proposed resolutions. The first one being pages 13 and 14, and the second one is pages 15 through 18. So the first proposed draft does the simplest of the 2 options. The first proposed draft on page 14 just adds mining activities and related services to the list of intermediate impact facilities that would be considered for a special exception in the A1 zoning district, and references that existing section with development standards for mining activities, which is 4.120. The second proposed draft, starting on page 15 and going to page 18, with the content relief beyond on page 16 and 17. This is relatively in line with what they do in Dixon County and recommends adding to the definition section, a definition for mining activities to include facilities to crush, classify, separate, or otherwise treat rock, ore, and minerals extracted from the ground. And then the second section of this proposed amendment adds different language to the special exceptions that's similar to Dixon County in the A1 zoning district, which would add surface and subsurface mining or quarrying of minerals and resources and or the storing of natural mineral resources as a special exception in A1. So again, really separating the extraction and kind of the processing and putting that actual extraction, the mining, the quarrying in the A1 district, and then adds section 3 as well, which proposes adding mining activities and related services as defined in that first definition in section 1 to the intermediate impact industrial district as a special exception review. that's kind of my walkthrough of these. So if you have any questions, or if Sam has additional comments, because I'm not sure if he's reviewed these proposed resolutions as well, let me know.
My suggestion is that we go with the number 2. We don't really have any zonings that would be sufficient for it. But if we're going to review this and approve anything, we might as well just make sure there's 2 different zonings that it could go in. That way there's more possibilities that if anybody does apply, there's 2 options, 2 areas they can look at. We have the area down by the nuclear plant that if they were to purchase property, then it could go down there. That's the one area that it might fit. So
To clarify, option 2, as I wrote it, separates extraction and processing between agricultural and industrial. If you're proposing that it all be lumped as one use, that can be done. It's just not the way it's written. Just want to clarify that.
So it might need to be
Yeah, and I can, this is a draft resolution that I'm presenting to the body. So if you all have a change you want to make, I can make that change and bring it back to you. Or you could, make a motion asking that I amend it in a certain way. I can craft that language.
Well, I'd like to hear from the mayor on this too, since this would have to go to the county court. And this is a pretty big proposal. Mayor?
Honestly, I'd like to look at it more, to be honest with you. I do have some questions looking through it. Is exactly what, I do like the section that has a definition on it. I obviously like definitions. You define something, so I like that section. But I do have some further questions looking at it. I know you just said there's some separation. Can you repeat what you just said in the proposal number 2? You said there was some separation between some of the, I guess, activities could take place. If you could just go over that again.
Yeah, absolutely. So draft 2 is adjacent to what they currently have in the Dixon County standards. In the Dixon County standards, in their agricultural zoning district, they allow the surface and subsurface extraction and storage of minerals, rock, or that kind of thing. So this is actually extraction. They separately define mining activities and then allow those activities in their industrial district. And that includes crushing, classifying, or otherwise processing what's been drawn from the ground. They classify that separately as an industrial activity than what they do in their A1 district, which is extraction. I think the intent is that the classifying, the processing is something that could be relatively noxious, and they want to keep it in an industrial district with understanding that quarrying, and this is, again, I can get further opinions on this. This is my understanding of it. With the understanding that subsurface and subsurface mining or quarrying is something that typically happens in a sparsely populated area away from anywhere interior to the community. So I think the intent is that they've put that in the A1 district, knowing that that will happen probably somewhere sparsely populated. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're best going to dig it out of the ground in one place, ship it somewhere else where you're going to process it.
Yes. Yeah, they are both relatively noxious. The existing development standards, which is in 4.120 of your zoning ordinance, or zoning resolution, I can read those out because I know you probably don't all have them sitting in front of you, but there is a certain level, I think it's 100 feet from any side of their site that they would be able to use. So that's their buffer. And there's some other provisions in there to try to lessen the disruption to anything. And the first standard, as Sam mentioned, is kind of a blanket statement that any area considered has to be of a lower population and should be of a lower population through the time that the site's going to be used. I don't know, typically I'd say what a quarry is used for 5 to 10 years. So we'd probably run population projections and use that as a consideration that would be reviewed at the Board of Zoning Appeals.
So just to clarify, what we're doing here tonight is we're trying to clarify the zoning. Right now, I believe it's a blanket statement and it can go in any zoning. We have, right now in our ordinance, I believe it's a blanket statement that allows it to go in any zoning location. So A1, R1, R2, R3, anywhere that would be sparsely populated, that the Board of Zoning Appeals agrees is sparsely populated. So what we're trying to do is to define a specific area like A1 and M1. For those are the only 2 areas that it can go.
We obviously don't need it to be able to just go anywhere. So we do need some guidance. And that's what I think Sam and Mary are talking about, is guidance as to where in the future it could go.
There's more R2 property that a mine could be arguably put in Trouser County than there is most of the other zoning districts. A1 and R2, I can argue with you all day on 1,000 locations to put it based on size of properties and it being sparsely populated. So with us adding the language that it needs to only be in A1 and M1, that takes out any R zoning. So.
Yeah, and I'll just real quick speak to that. So I'm the one who originated that there's no zoning district it's listed in, and it should be listed as a permitted use. So, or a special exception somewhere if it's going to be considered by this body, with the understanding that if someone were to propose a development and neighbors or the community were worried about the impacts to quarrying, it would be relatively difficult to answer their questions if we didn't have a zoning district that this would be allowed to be put in. And our judgment was the subject of, we decided it's sparsely populated and acceptable. I know that in some other communities, I haven't worked directly, just read news articles in this kind of situation where something's been considered and there's, you know, a quarry that neighbors are upset about. The first thing they're going to say is, this is a residential area. It's not supposed to be there. It can't be there. I think by placing it in a zoning district, it definitely takes that off the table, that someone could say, oh, this is sparsely populated, but everything around it is zoned R1. It gives them an option to say, okay, well, we have a zoning district, it meets that zoning requirement, and then it's still going to go through that special exception process that still requires it to be sparsely populated, meet all the buffer requirements, that sort of thing.
If we don't make rules to manage it, then someone wanting to do it will come in and we'll just say, we don't want it. And that ain't gonna fly. And then you've got a chancery judge telling you whether you are or not gonna have it. We need to manage it, and where we can control it locally and not a judge somewhere doing it. We've had this issue before. It's been years ago, but we have had this issue before, and we just need to, if I might make a recommendation, if somebody is, one, I think the mayor needs to have some time to look into it on his end. And if we defer it a month, then Sam and Mary can get together and look at putting draft 1 and draft 2 together, and then let the mayor look at it and come up with maybe a more final thing, and then look at it next month and send that to the county court.
I think what would be helpful to me too, would be to get direction from the commission on what's generally preferred. If there's a preference between draft 1 and draft 2. So if I do come back with something, at least there's a little bit of direction from this body on what you all would like.
My suggestion would be as strict as possible. But we do need something, so. Commission members, y'all's feelings?
I agree with you. It need to be as strict as possible. And I think we need to take a little time, maybe let the mayor look at this, and come up with a reasonable but very strict recommendation.
Well, it's gonna have to, whatever final passage is will be done by the county court. And the mayor needs to be on, board with that also, since the court and the mayor are going to be the ones defending this at some point in time, probably. Questions, comments? Do I have a motion to maybe defer this until next month?
Make a motion to defer to next month and put it together.
Let all the parties
with that
get
strictness in it.
Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Harper. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. It is deferred. I do appreciate y'all's work on this, Mary and Sam. It's a very important thing that we need to look at moving forward. Because they ever, like I've always said it, if sometime in my lifetime they ever do get started on the last part of 141, they're going to need, gravel. They didn't put that concrete plan in here just for driveways. Are we up to this one, the townhomes? Make sure I'm not, yeah, just make sure I'm not skipping anything. Next on our agenda is site plan approval for the towns at Melrose. This is a townhome subdivision on 11.15 acres on Melrose Drive. Do we have someone here to speak to this? Yes, sir. Please come to the podium, tell us your name and what you'd like to do.
My name is Jerry Gammon Jr. With the development looking to develop the town of Melrose with 118 units.
How many did you say?
118.
So for this project, I am just going to jump in and note, and we had this conversation with the applicant before the meeting, so I think this shouldn't be an issue. With the scale that this project is at, and it being 11 acres and there being utilities shown throughout the site, and a number of different moving pieces and parts, we're looking at this just as a site plan, but my recommendation is that this is going to be also come through as a preliminary plat and a final plat. So that we're looking at in the plat that comes through, to clarify, would really just be establishing all those utilities, and potentially the street if they decide to make that a private street, so that there's access to all those utilities established and recorded. So right now, I would say that any decision the body makes on this site plan just be conditioned that it come back for preliminary and final plat approval as well. I did get a resubmittal on this project on Friday, late after I sent out the staff comments. So most of the items as far as meeting what's in our zoning ordinance for site plan review for a group housing development have been addressed. The only item remaining is related to the buffer strip. The buffer strip that the applicant is showing proposes the 7-foot opaque fence, as well as cypress, red cedar, and white pines surrounding the site, spaced just a few feet apart. And you can see that in the landscaping plan. I don't know which sheet that is off the top of my head, but it's shown in that landscaping plan. The language in the zoning code states that where a use requiring a site plan abuts at any point upon property zoned residential or agricultural, the developer of said use shall provide a landscape buffer strip at the point of abutment, which shall consist of a solid fence no less than 7 feet tall and landscaping, including trees, the intent of which is to create an opaque screen between the new development and existing development. And the buffer strip should be no less than 10 foot in width. The reference there to the buffer strip, the zoning ordinance goes further to define a buffer strip and include both the tree requirement and shrubs and hedges at another point in the ordinance. The language that I read here says the intent is to create an opaque screen between the new development and existing development. I believe that this proposed buffer does meet that intent, but it does not have the 2 rows of shrubs that are required in the definition. So I do just want the commission to make a determination on if this meets the intent or if this buffer is something that would also require a variance on this strip that's shown.
Questions for Mary? Good. Sam?
So the site plan that has been submitted, the measurements work out. There's a centralized postal box with adequate parking. The sidewalks are in place. The concern at the moment is the utility access from the county. I know we've been thoroughly in deep conversations with the water department, and everything has been met on the engineering standards for what they want, but the concern is their actual legal access to it, since it's going to remain under an HOA policy. And each unit's going to have its own tap. So they'll need to have legal rights to go in and dig up taps and do whatever they need. This is something that we need to look into further for this type of subdivision. I believe I stated all that correctly, right, Mary? Close enough?
Yeah, that's close enough. Yeah, in the past, we looked at a townhome division before, and it was a smaller scale, and it was a private drive going through it. And I think they were putting everything on a master meter, or if they weren't, I wasn't aware prior to it.
The taps were at the main road
Yeah,
and ran
so-
to each unit.
Yeah, so if anyone needed to do a meter reading or anything like that, they weren't using the private drive to go in there. There is also a provision in the subdivision regulations that does require something that's going to be sold under a regime to come through for a preliminary plat and a final plat. I believe that may have been the case with the past townhome division that was reviewed, but I was not aware at the time that that was the intent. So that's just something that I now know we need to check for and have someone clarify their intent when they do submit this type of subdivision. And we'll get together and clean up this review process going forward.
So in short, everything on here looks good. My recommendation is for approval of the site plan with the requirement that we come back forward with the 2 viewings so that we can hash out the legal details on the sewer and water system. and get that to where there would be no issues in the future. So,
So your recommendation, say that one more time. Site plan approval with the two.
right, the
With
preliminary
yeah.
and the final.
site plan approval contingent on them coming back with a preliminary plat and a final plat. And then their site plan would not be approved until that final plat is approved.
Okay.
Yeah, we're almost doing it in reverse. We're gonna go ahead and I think we should approve the site plan approval with the contingent on the preliminary and the final.
Okay. Members, do y'all understand the recommendations of Sam and Mary?
What was she saying? What did you say, Ms. Mary, about the buffers?
For the buffer strip, I do just want clarification from this body on some of the language in the zoning ordinance, because I was not present at the time that that requirement was put in place. So I'm not clear on the intent. If the intent is for the applicant to need to meet the exact definition that's included in the zoning ordinance for buffer strip, that requires a fence, trees, and 10 foot of landscaping space. And that 10 foot of landscaping space includes 2 rows of shrubs. The language in 3.110 of the zoning ordinance says that the intent is to require an opaque screen that buffers this from any other development. The applicant here is proposing a solid fence and trees that are spaced a couple feet apart all the way around the property. So it does, I would say, meet the intent. It's going to create an opaque screen. Just want clarification on if, in this case, those 2 rows of shrubs would also be required, and this buffer would have to be 10 foot wide. I think the spread of the trees in the plan is maybe 4 to 5 feet. And then that fence covers another couple feet as well.
If I might make a suggestion that whoever, if somebody wants to make a motion, they might want to include that the petitioner work with Sam and get his approval on the buffer strip. And I mean, if Sam approves it, then I'm just saying that would be fine with me. But that's just me. Y'all need to speak your mind. Comments, questions? Don't everybody speak at once.
So if you go to C 10.0, it shows his plan for the fencing and the shrub location.
So there are both shrubs and trees?
They're in the ordinance, there's shrubs and trees required. What the applicant is showing is cypress, cedar, and pine spaced in a line around the site.
Okay.
So just trees. There's no proposed shrubs unless, I don't know. I'm not a tree expert. They're trees. They all have a taller height. And you can see in the schedule on the far left side of the page what the proposed height and spread, or what the anticipated height and spread of those trees would be.
My thinking was each development is going to be a little bit different. And our proposal was to have adequate buffering between each development and whatever we're buffering it from. So that's what my suggestion was, to let Sam work with the developer on it to meet what is adequate. I'm saying I don't know we can always stick right to the letter of the definition each and every time, because each development can be different depending upon topography and things like that. Sam, you look like you want to say something.
So to answer the tree and shrub question, so depending on how you prune a tree, it can stay low to the ground, but also grow tall. If you put shrubs, they only grow to a certain height. So with the trees, if you like going on Airport Road into Gallatin, and you look at the, I think it's a 50 and up subdivision on the left, they have all trees planted, but they keep them pruned all the way to the ground. So there's no open area on the ground, but they grow, 13, 14 feet tall, and they just keep them shaped. So, but with the shrub, generally they're going to stay tabletop high. So, but they already have their 7-foot fencing. So, I don't see a problem with it being trees instead of the shrubs in this particular case.
Other comments, questions? Mr. Harper?
Are you losing some space there, or as far as with the shrubs, it was talking about, what, 2 feet extra? You losing what, 2 feet you say there, Ms. Mary?
So the exact definition for buffer strip that's included in the zoning ordinance is a greenway belt planted strip not less than 10 foot in width. Such a green belt should consist of 1 row of evergreen trees spaced not more than 40 feet apart, and not less than 2 rows of shrubs or hedges spaced not more than 5 feet apart, which grow to a height of 5 feet or more after 1 full growing season, and which shrubs will eventually grow to a height no less than 10 feet. So on the left side of the page on that landscaping plan, you can see the proposed height that these will all get to and the proposed spread. So with the fence and the full spread, I think you're probably at about 7 feet between this and the back of the units. So it'd be a couple of feet short of that definition. And that's the definition that's listed. But the language in the ordinance does say that it lists the fence, the landscaping, including trees, and states the intent of which is to create the opaque screen between new and existing development. So sometimes it's just not entirely clear to me on if you all want to go by the exact definition of what's included for a buffer strip, or if you want it to meet the intent of creating that opaque screen. The rest of section 3.110, besides saying that language that I just read, continues to say that buffers are required between industrial and commercial district. See definition section, the buffer strip shall be no less than 10 feet in width. So it continues to specifically reference that definition of buffer strips in relation to industrial and commercial districts, and states that 10 foot in width provision. I know this is probably about as clear as mud. I want the commission to just let me know if this is going to satisfy their buffer requirement.
Was your question, would it, if they have to go back and put in shrubbery, would it take some backyard away from each unit?
Would it add some? The only concern I have is on this here Melrose Drive side where these existing houses are. We want to make sure we have a good buffer strip between that.
I agree. And you've got the fence there, and then you've got the line of trees and things. I mean, I agree with you.
That's my only concern. This right here, or where these existing houses are.
To me, it's hard to tell from a drawing like this. That's why my suggestion was to let Sam work with it to make sure that it's adequate. Other comments, concerns? Rhonda, you look like you got it.
Well, I just think it meets the intent. What we intended to do was have a good buffer between them and anybody else. And I think the trees and the fence will meet that myself.
Okay. Other questions or comments? So we got off on trees and fence. I forgot what your recommendation was. Would you repeat your recommendation?
I recommend that we approve it as site plan. It's a site plan approval contingent upon a preliminary plat and a final plat.
Yes.
Yes, and the verbiage that he said.
So what Sam is saying is that we approve this site. His recommendation is that we approve this site plan tonight and contingent upon coming back with the preliminary plat and final plat, and that he work with the developer on adequate buffer zone, buffer strip. And of course, you can make any motion you like. So what is the will of the commission? I'm sorry.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, since you got to write it down, are you making the motion that of what Sam said and what I added?
That we approve tonight and the site plan
Approve the-
tonight.
Okay, motion is to approve the tonight's site plan with preliminary plat and final plat approval still to come.
Right.
And that Sam work with the developer on an adequate buffer strip around the property. Does everybody understand the motion? Questions, concerns, comments? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. Okay, it does pass every how many to one. Okay. Moving on. Next on our agenda, discussion topics. A proposal for the West Main Sidewalk Rehabilitation Project of the sidewalks on West Main Street from the termination of the streetscape project, which is at the corner of East Main Street and Broadway and Church intersection, to the West Main Street and Littleton Street. Go ahead, sir.
All right, the Trouser County is wanting to continue the streetscape project I'd say in a sense, not necessarily all the tree planting and other added features that came with the streetscape and the parallel park and all that. This is mainly just to fix dilapidated sidewalks in y'all's downtown area. It's been tasked to us to do a 5-year plan, so we're trying to do what's in the budget per year. So this is phase 1, if I guess you want to call it something, phase 1 of 5. So what we plan to do is to go past the beauty shop down there that was just done. We'll go up that side. Due to the topographic relief there, we've got to put the steps back because the way you're hung by the building's finished floors is there now. So, and we got to make it ADA compliant as much as possible. So the steps are going to have to be there on that side. We're going to go all the way up to Littleton Street and stop. The reason we're stopping there is 1, the funds, number 2, it's a parking lot over there to the post office. The opposite side of the road, we're gonna have that's gonna be ADA accessible all the way to the post office. So they can, the parking is down by the gazebo here. You could park there and have a wheelchair that would make it all the way up to the post office. That's pretty much what we're doing. We're putting some steps back to where they was, and we're turning it down Littleton so it could run down Littleton at some point in the future.
Okay. So it's a sidewalk rehabilitation project on West Main Street from where the streetscape ended there up to the post office, both sides of the road. Did I state that correctly, sir?
That's correct. And we do have a crosswalk across Littleton Street, so.
Questions for this gentleman? Sam? You got any?
Are you going beyond the post office?
Say that again,
Are
sir.
you going beyond the post office or stopping at the post?
No, we're stopping right here at Littleton Street for this phase. The post office has got their own sidewalk and it is compliant at this point with ADA. So we're only getting the ones that's in downtown area that is dilapidated at this point. So they're not putting no new sidewalks right now. The county is more concerned with fixing the ones they've already got. So this is the
it would
first phase.
end right there at that, where they fix up cars and stuff on that side of the road.
And we did put, I've took it before the county and they've reviewed it, and we did put some trash cans in that meets the ones that y'all got out here. We're trying to keep the same thing going. And if the mayor wants to add anything else, I'll let him, because it's part of the county.
Okay. Mayor?
This is basically replacing the existing sidewalk. And if you've been down through there's some places it was poured thinner than it should have been, and it's cracked up really bad in those areas. Plus, it's not ADA compliant. So it's basically replacing the sidewalk that's there, making it ADA compliant, and just not expanding it beyond where it currently is. It's just, like I said, rehabilitating the sidewalks there, making it ADA compliant.
So the way I would say it is we're bringing the sidewalks on both sides of the street up to code.
That's correct.
Any other questions, concerns? So what is it that we may?
He just wanted y'all to see it before he signed off on it.
Okay.
The only
we
thing I
don't
did
need a
want to
motion
bring to
or
y'all's
anything.
attention, because it's, I mean, you got to look at it. We're having to put a railing system. I do not know the addresses, but it's on where the stairs are. There will be a rail in front of that building because it's over 30 inches by code. You got to have it to keep somebody from falling off there. Right now they could. So that's the only thing that's going to look any different basically than what you got out there right now, except for grade changes. So.
I mean, this body has gone on record pretty good over the last couple of years of being in favor of sidewalks, adding them to our subdivisions and that type of thing. And we see the importance of it. And rehabilitating existing sidewalks and bringing them up to code and just making them safer is advantageous in my way of thinking. So again, we're not making a motion or anything tonight, just kind of bringing it up, but does anybody have any concerns or questions or problems or with any of this?
Is there not anything that can be done differently for the side that has stairs? Are stairs the only option for that side of the street?
Probably.
Yes, ma'am. The floor of the buildings that's there now, they've got you held. So you've got to be able to get the people in the doors. So either you got to bring it back down, and then you're going to expose all the building there in front of the windows. And then you'd have steps getting up into their doorway that they don't have now. So therefore you can't get wheelchairs in their actual entrance. So there's certain rules we got to stay with. There's certain ADA rules, and there's also there's a design criteria called ProAg, which lets you get by with a little bit more than just standard ADA. It's due to it being on a road, so you can run things a little steeper. And we've met all those that we can, except for, like you said, the stairways. Our thoughts on that was, if the sidewalk continues on, somebody could come up and come back down this other side, because they are going to be able to access ADA from Littleton Street down to the steps, and of course from down up to the steps. So the steps are going to be your only criteria that's not going to meet the ADA requirements.
Which are going to put handrails and stuff up there.
Yes,
So
it'll be
it'll be
handrails.
safer than what's there now.
Yeah, double handrails, and then there's going to be a guardrail all the way down, or fencing, however you want to look at it, all the way down.
That's on Littleton right there by the post office, right?
Yeah, that alleyway up there, that's actually a street, but I always just thought of it as an alley. Other questions? I think it's a good project. I'm always in favor of making what we got better. Well, pretty's nice, but safety is more my. I got nothing against pretty, but yeah. Okay, sounds good to me. Is there anything else to come before the Planning Commission tonight? I know we've had quite a few things. Just want to bring to your attention under closing remarks from the chair. I've been keeping a running tally. We have approved tonight 141 individual homes and 28 apartments. And Trousdale County is growing and continuing to grow. If you add the 48 homes that Little Jean's started, you notice the roads going in there. The only reason I'm saying this is everybody saying, man, it's great, property tax, sales tax. But this does have an effect on schools, school buses, classrooms, teachers. So there's it's not just all coming in. There is a cause and effect here that sometimes we tend to not think about, I think sometimes. I'm not saying anything against it. I'm just saying that there are other things that's going to come up that we're going to have to deal with as a county, not this body necessarily, but as a county. Anything else to come before the Planning Commission tonight? Appreciate everybody being here, giving up your Valentine's Day with your and all of that. I think my wife is glad to get rid of me.
I think I just do want to make a comment. I had mentioned briefly when we looked at the site plan for the Jesse Peters apartments that there is not anything as far as a maximum density in the C1 zoning district for the residential uses that are permitted. And Sam mentioned briefly too that there's some other items that there's development standards for that are excluded from uses in the Trousdale resolution. I have talked a little bit about this at GNRC, and I know I've had this conversation with Sam in the past. A whole rewrite to the ordinance or the resolution would be too much, but I do want to start to sort through some of the smaller errors that I've found in either the zoning resolution or in the zoning ordinance with this body. So those might come in as staff requests for review through the next year or so. In the meantime, understanding that maybe at some point a whole rewrite should be looked at. But this would be kind of Band-Aids to start looking at for this body. So those will likely start coming through based on availability that I have. And the first probably being that I'll bring in some examples of other historic downtowns in the area and what they allow as far as residential uses on density in their downtown areas. So just look for that coming from me in the future.
I think that's good. We are in a desired area. The Nashville area is growing and continuing to grow. And if you watch any news, it doesn't seem to be letting up. And we seem to be part of that desired area. And I don't blame them. That's why I live here. So, anything else? Motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Second. We are adjourned. Thank y'all.